From childhood, Ilara always felt different. Her hair was thick, dark, and wild, and strangers often commented on it, sometimes with awe, sometimes with envy, sometimes with scorn. But her grandmother, a quiet woman of prayer, would often place her hands upon Ilara's head and whisper, "This is not hair, my child. This is a crown heaven placed upon you long before the world ever spoke your name." As she grew older, life hardened her. School bullying, family struggles, and adulthood responsibilities made her forget her grandmother's words. Her hair began to weaken, falling in clumps during moments of stress. She felt humiliated, broken, and ashamed. And because she believed her hair was ordinary, she did not understand that something spiritual was happening, something trying to dim her identity. Yet heaven had never forgotten her crown. Ilara Dawn was born on a quiet winter morning, when the sky was awash, stout silver, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The midwife, a gentlewoman named Sister Harrow, gasped the moment she lifted the newborn into the cold air of the cottage. "Look at her hair," she whispered in awe. Ilara's mother, pale and exhausted, blinked in confusion. "Hair? She already has hair." Sister Harrow nodded. "Not just hair amain, thick as night and soft as silk." Her grandmother, Miriam, stepped forward. She had been praying silently throughout the birth. The moment she saw the child, her eyes filled with tears, not of worry, but recognition. "This one," Miriam whispered, her voice trembling, "comes with a crown heaven placed before she even breathed her first breath." No one understood what she meant, not even Ilara's mother. But Miriam did not explain. She simply gathered the newborn in her arms, pressed her lips to the baby's forehead, and held her as though she were holding a prophecy. A childhood marked by wonder as Ilara grew. Her hair grew with her, wild, long, and unruly in a way that made strangers stare. Some said it was beautiful, some said it was too much. Children tugged on it, neighbors made comments. Teachers suggested it be cut short to look tidy. But her grandmother refused. "This is not mere hair." Miriam would say firmly, "This is her mantle." Her grandmother took care of her hair with almost ceremonial devotion. Every Sunday evening, she warmed coconut oil on the stove until the air smelled like sweetness and comfort. She would sit Ilara on a wooden stool, part her hair gently, and massage the oil into her scalp. "These strands carry memory," she would murmur. "These roots carry blessing. These curls carry destiny." Ilara never fully understood, but she felt safe wrapped in love and warmth. She loved the way her grandmother's prayers flowed like water, surrounding her head, sealing her in a cocoon of whispered promises. When the world began to notice, everything changed when she turned 11. School children began to whisper behind her back, "Why is her hair so big? She looks like a witch. She thinks she's special." The comments stung, but Ilara tried to ignore them. She kept her grandmother's words close to her heart like secret armor. But some days, the armor didn't feel strong enough. One afternoon, during lunch break, a girl named Tara sneered at her in front of everyone and said, "You hide behind your hair because you're scared people will see you're nothing." The group of girls laughed. Ilara felt the words hit her deeper than they should have. She ran to the bathroom and locked herself inside. She cried, not because of the insult, but because somehow a piece of her believed it. When she went home, she asked her grandmother quietly, "Is my hair a curse?" Miriam turned so sharply that even the wooden beads around her neck clinked. "Never say that again," she said, kneeling down to meet Ilara's eyes. "Your hair is not the problem. People are threatened by what they do not understand. But why does it matter so much?" Ilara whispered. Her grandmother placed a hand over her chest. "It matters to heaven," she replied. "And what matters to heaven will always be attacked on earth." Elara didn't fully grasp the meaning, but she trusted her grandmother completely, so she let the explanation settle, even if it didn't make sense yet. The first sign something spiritual was happening when Elara was 15, her grandmother fell ill. Not suddenly, but gradually, like a flame weakening in slow motion. Her once strong hands shook, her voice softened, her steps slowed. One evening after school, Elara found her sleeping in the rocking chair. A Bible balanced on her lap, open to Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Elara gently shook her shoulder. Grandma, wake up. It's time for your medicines. Miriam blinked slowly, then reached up and took Elara's hand. My girl, she whispered, listen carefully. The day will come when you will feel lost when something tries to touch your crown. Elara frowned. My hair, no, Miriam said, brushing a curl behind her ear. Your identity, your authority, your destiny, your hair is only the sign of something sacred. When it comes under attack, remember, heaven never forgets what it has crowned. The words frightened Elara in a way she couldn't explain. A chill ran down her spine. What do I do when that day comes? She asked quietly. Her grandmother smiled. A tired, tender smile. You will remember who placed the crown on your head, and you will rise. The day she lost her protector 2 months later, Miriam passed away peacefully in her sleep. The house felt cold without her. The prayers that once filled the walls were replaced with silence. Elara felt as though she'd lost the only person who understood the unseen part of her. The night after the funeral, Elara sat in front of her mirror, running her fingers through her hair. She felt strangely disconnected from herself, as though the part of her grandmother had always nurtured was slipping away. In the mirror's reflection, she could almost see her grandmother standing behind her, placing her hands on her head and whispering blessings. But when she blinked, the vision vanished. For the first time, Elara felt unprotected, alone, exposed. A slow unraveling by the time she turned 16, stress from school, grief from losing her grandmother, and pressure to fit in began to eat at her confidence. And then one morning she saw it, a clump of hair in the shower drain, her breath caught in her throat. She touched her scalp, the roots felt weak, the strands thinner. Her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind, when something tries to touch your crown. Her chest tightened. Tears stung her eyes. Something deep inside her whispered that this was not normal, not physical, not random. It felt like a spiritual unraveling, but she said nothing to anyone. Instead, she began tying her hair tightly, hiding the thinning patches, pretending everything was fine, pretending she wasn't scared, pretending she didn't notice the strange heaviness that seemed to linger around her like a shadow, growing into adulthood with a fading crown years past. Elara moved away for university, then for work. She tried to build a life that looked normal from the outside, but inside, she always felt as though a part of her was missing. Like a lock without a key, a story without the final chapter. Her hair continued to weaken during stressful seasons. Some days it fell more, some days less. She tried oils, vitamins, treatments, specialists. Nothing worked, not really. Once, a doctor suggested it was emotional shedding. Too much stress, he said. Hair is often the first thing to show it. But Elara knew, deep down, that her grandmother had been right. Something was attacking her crown, something she could not see, but could feel. She began to believe that perhaps the girls from school had been right all along. Perhaps without her hair, she really was nothing, and that belief, small at first, slowly grew. A spirit dimming without her knowing. By the time Elara reached her late 20s, she had become a quiet, withdrawn version of herself. She avoided mirrors. She kept her hair tied back constantly. She avoided photos, parties, and anything that required confidence. Life did not break her suddenly. It eroded her gradually, one strand at a time, one discouraging comment at a time, one forgotten prayer at a time. Her grandmother's words, once a source of comfort, felt like memories from someone else's life. She no longer recognized the girl with the wild mane who once felt different in a magical, sacred way. The world had convinced her that different meant less. She believed it, until the day destiny intervened, until the day the attack deepened, until the day heaven stepped in. But that belongs to the next chapter. Ilara's new job at Harrington and Steele was supposed to be a fresh beginning, her first real step into adulthood, a chance to rebuild the confidence she had lost. Over the years, the office was modern, the pay decent, and the hours manageable. On her first morning, she stood before the mirror in her small flat, trying to tame her hair into a low, neat bun. A few rebellious curls escaped, as they always did. She sighed. Just behave today, she muttered under her breath. Her hair, however, had never been obedient. It carried memory, it carried story, it carried something heaven had once whispered. But now Ilara could no longer see any beauty in it. She only saw imperfection. She pinned the stray curls down and hurried out the door. The first encounter with Mara on her first day, she met Mara. Mara Richmond was the type of woman who took up space without saying a word. Elegant, tall, sharp cheekbones, flawless makeup, everything about her seemed immaculate. She wore straight, glossy hair that looked like it belonged in an advertisement. She glanced at Ilara with a thin smile. "You're the new girl," Mara said. "Welcome." Something in her tone felt like a handshake dipped in poison. Ilara couldn't place it, so she simply smiled politely and murmured a shy "thank you." But Mara's eyes lingered on her hair with a strange expression, half amusement, half disdain. Small comments that slowly became weapons. The first week passed uneventfully. But then the comments began. Small, subtle, almost invisible to someone who wasn't paying attention. But Ilara heard every word. "Your bun is a bit messy today, isn't it? It must take ages to handle hair like yours. I don't know how you manage. I'd go mad." Each sentence was delivered with a smile, polite enough to escape accusation, sharp enough to leave bruises. Ilara tried to ignore it. She had dealt with worse in school, she told herself. These were only words. They couldn't hurt her, but they did. Words always hurt her, deeper than they should, deeper than she ever admitted. The day the whispers turned into laughter one afternoon, Ilara walked into the break room to make tea. She paused when she heard her name. Mara was standing with two colleagues. "I'm just saying," Mara said, lowering her voice but not enough. "She acts like that hair makes her important. But honestly, chop it off and she'd have nothing left." The other two giggled. "Maybe it's a shield," one of them whispered, "like she's hiding behind it." They laughed again. Ilara froze. Those same words, hiding behind your hair, you're nothing without it. She had heard them years ago from school bullies. Hearing them again, as an adult, felt like reopening an old wound. She tried to back away quietly, but her hand accidentally brushed a stack of mugs. One clattered to the ground. The room fell silent. Mara turned. "Oh, Ilara," she said with false cheer. "Didn't see you there." Ilara forced a tight smile. "Sorry, just needed some tea." When she turned to leave, she heard one of the women whisper, "Awkward." She felt the tears rising but swallowed them down. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and stared blankly at her computer screen. Her chest felt heavy. Her scalp tingled. A familiar dread crawled through her. Her hair had always been the target. In childhood, in adolescence, and now again, but this time something felt different, darker, almost intentional. The strange dreams began that night, Ilara dreamed. She stood in a dark, misty field. A cold wind blew. She could hear whispers coming from somewhere unseen. You are nothing. Your crown is broken. God has forgotten you. Shadows slithered around her feet, rising like smoke. She tried to run, but the mist thickened, pulling at her, wrapping itself around her hair. It tugged, pulled, ripped. She felt strands tearing away. No stop. She cried. The mist only tightened. A shape began to form within the fog, dark, hollow-eyed, whispering, "You will never be who you think you are." Elara woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart hammering in her ears. She stumbled to the bathroom and turned on the light. Her jaw dropped. Her pillow was covered with fallen strands of hair. "No," she whispered in horror. She touched her scalp. It felt tender, almost bruised. Fear shot through her. This was more than stress, more than anxiety, more than physical. This felt spiritual. She remembered her grandmother's warning. The day will come when something tries to touch your crown. Was this that day? The office gets worse. The next few weeks were a blur of exhaustion, dreams, and whispers. The more her hair weakened, the stronger Mara's hostility became. One morning, when Elara arrived at her desk, she found a small pair of office scissors lying on her chair with a note, "For the battle with the frizz." Her stomach sank. She looked around, hoping it was a joke gone wrong. But Mara sat at her desk, smirking, as though she were watching a show. Elara's hands trembled. She threw the scissors into her drawer and walked to the bathroom. Her scalp burned. Her hair felt thinner than the week before. She whispered to herself, "Why is this happening? What have I done wrong?" But she knew, deep down, this was not just a mean co-worker, not just workplace toxicity, not just insecurity. This was an attack on something inside her, something older than her job, older than the office walls, older than the hurts she carried, something spiritual. Her reflection becomes her enemy. One evening, Elara returned home exhausted. She dropped her bag onto the floor and leaned against the mirror in the hallway. She didn't want to look, but she did. Her reflection startled her. Her once thick hair looked dull, lifeless, thinner at the crown. She lifted a section and watched it fall limp between her fingers. "I'm falling apart," she whispered brokenly. For a moment she thought she saw something in the mirror behind her, something dark, flickering, watching her. She blinked, it vanished, her knees buckled. She slid to the floor, burying her face in her hands. "Grandma, I need you," she whispered. "Please tell me what to do." But the house remained silent. The breaking point, the attack, reached its peak one Friday afternoon. Mara was in an unusually sharp mood, striking out at anyone who crossed her path. Elara kept her head down, praying silently that she wouldn't be noticed. But Mara always noticed her. Near the end of the day, Mara walked past her desk, stopped, and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Honestly, Elara, your hair looks worse every week. Haven't you considered you know?" She mimed cutting with her fingers, starting over. Laughter rippled through the room. Elara felt something inside her snap. Not anger, something much deeper, a wound tearing open. Her eyes burned, her throat tightened. She stood up abruptly, grabbed her bag, and fled the office. She didn't wait for the lift. She ran down the stairs, out the building, and into the cold evening air. She walked until she reached the riverbank, where the city lights shimmered on the water like 1,000 tiny lies. She sank onto a bench and finally let the tears fall. She felt attacked, targeted, marked. "This is more than bullying," she whispered. "Something is trying to break me." And for the first time, she said it aloud, "It wants my crown." A shiver ran through her, as though the wind itself had heard. Her grandmother's voice returned to her memory. "When it comes under attack, remember heaven never forgets what it has crowned." Elara wiped her tears with trembling hands. "Heaven," she whispered shakily, "if you remember me, I need you. Please. She didn't know it then, couldn't see it. But the moment she spoke those words, something shifted in the unseen realm. Angels stirred, shadows recoiled, heaven leaned closer. The attack was real, but so was the rescue that was coming. And it would begin with a whisper unlike any she had ever heard. The night of the riverbank breakdown marked the beginning of something Ilara could not yet see. It was the lowest point she had ever reached, yet heaven often chooses the lowest valleys to echo the loudest call. Ilara walked home slowly, her steps heavy, her spirit bruised. By the time she reached her flat, the city lights had blurred into streaks of gold through her tear-soaked lashes. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The moment she entered, an unusual stillness wrapped around her. A silence that felt thick, deliberate, almost expectant. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, exhausted. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to the empty room. The air did not respond, or so she thought. A cry too deep for words, she dropped her bag, walked to the center of the room, and finally collapsed to her knees. Her hands covered her face as the tears fell freely. "Lord," she whispered shakily, "why is this happening to me? What am I doing wrong? Why does it feel like everything is being taken from me?" Her voice cracked. "Have you forgotten me?" She had never said those words before. Even in her darkest moments, she had clung to some small belief that heaven still watched, still cared. But tonight, she felt abandoned, invisible, forgotten. Her tears soaked into the carpet. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "I don't understand why something so simple, so ordinary, keeps breaking me." Her voice dropped to barely a breath. "Please, if you're there, help me." The moment heaven answered, the room stayed silent, but the silence felt different this time. Deeper, warmer, as though something unseen leaned close. Ilara did not notice at first. She only felt her crying slow. Her breathing eased. The heaviness in her chest softened, as though invisible hands were lifting it gently away. Then a warmth settled across her shoulders, subtle at first, then stronger, like a soft blanket placed around her. Ilara's breath caught. She looked up slowly. The room was the same, dimly lit, familiar. But the atmosphere was not the same. Something holy was in the air. A single tear slid down her cheek. "Grandma," she whispered. No one answered. But then, without warning, a quiet voice rose inside her. Not from the room, not from her mind, but from a place far deeper. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." Ilara froze. Her heart thudded once, hard. The words vibrated through her being like a bell struck in the center of her soul. She knew those words, Jeremiah 1:5, her grandmother's favorite scripture. She pressed her hand against her chest. "Is that you?" she whispered. Another whisper came, gentle, steady, absolute. "Before you were born, I set you apart." Ilara's eyes filled again, but this time with a different kind of tears. Pure, startling, unfamiliar. "God," she breathed. The whisper that broke the darkness, the warmth in the room, intensified, not burning, not overwhelming, but embracing, like sunlight filtered through water. Then another scripture rose within her. "Even the very hairs of your head are all numbered." Her breath hitched. Her hair, her crown, her grandmother's blessing, her childhood prayers, her identity, all the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't about beauty, not about appearance, not about vanity. It was about identity. The attack on her hair had been an attack on who she was, a targeted strike. A spiritual attempt to disconnect her from the destiny heaven had woven into her from birth. Ilara covered her mouth with trembling hands. "I forgot," she whispered, voice shaking. "I forgot what you said about me. I forgot who I was." A gentle whisper responded, "I did not forget." The tears streamed freely. She bowed her head, overwhelmed. The dream that shifted everything that night, exhausted from crying but comforted by the whisper, Ilara fell asleep on the sofa. Almost immediately, she slipped into a dream unlike any she'd ever experienced. She stood in a vast hall made of golden light. Each beam shimmered like liquid sunlight. The air hummed with warmth and peace. At the far end of the hall, a radiant figure approached, not blinding, not frightening, but beautiful in a way she could barely comprehend. He stopped in front of her. Though his face shone, she felt no fear, only recognition. He lifted his hand. Ilara felt her knees weaken. "Lord," she whispered. He held out a crown not made of gold or jewels, but of threads of light, each strand shimmering like woven sunlight and silk. The threads moved like living beams, glowing with memory and power. He placed the crown gently upon her head. The moment it touched her, she felt it, the memories of her grandmother's prayers, the identity heaven had assigned her, the authority she had forgotten, the destiny she had abandoned, all returned at once. She gasped, shaken, trembling. A voice, echoing with tenderness and strength, filled the hall. "You were chosen, you were set apart. Your crown cannot be destroyed." Ilara fell to her knees. "I'm not worthy," she whispered. The voice replied, "You were never meant to earn it. You were born with it." A warmth surged through her scalp, the same warmth she felt as a child when her grandmother prayed over her hair. The same warmth she felt earlier that night when heaven answered her cry. The crown shone brighter, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. And then everything dissolved into light. The morning of awakening Ilara woke with a start, breath trembling, heart pounding. The room was filled with early dawn light. Her clothes were wrinkled from sleeping on the sofa, her face damp with dried tears. But something was different. Inside her, a quiet strength pulsed, gentle, steady, unshakable. She sat up slowly and touched her hair. It felt the same, but she did not. She walked to the bathroom. She looked in the mirror. Her reflection stared back. Tired, yes. Worn, yes. But something gleamed in her eyes that hadn't been there in years. Recognition. "I know who I am," she whispered. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Heaven never forgets what it has crowned. She pressed her fingers to her scalp. "I will not forget again." A shift no one could deny the next morning at work. Mara glanced up as Ilara entered. But Ilara was different. She walked straighter. Her steps were steadier. Her posture no longer curled inward, but lifted, as though remembering a crown she carried, even if no one else could see it. Mara frowned, confused. Ilara smiled politely and took her seat, unbothered by the glances, the whispers, the eyes watching her. The attack had failed. Something inside her had awakened. Something heaven had planted before she was even formed. And now, finally, she was beginning to rise. The storm reached its peak on the very night she felt completely undone. It was past midnight, the house silent except for the ticking of the old clock hanging crookedly on the wall. She stood before the mirror, fingers trembling, eyes burning with unspoken tears. Her hair, once thick, once glorious, once her quiet pride, now felt thin, fragile, defeated. It wasn't only the physical loss. It was everything it represented. Her confidence, her femininity, her identity, her spiritual strength. She whispered into the dimly lit room, "Father, why does this hurt so much?" Her voice cracked, so small it barely left her lips. For the first time, she admitted the truth aloud. It was never just about the hair. It was about her crown, the symbol heaven had given her from birth. And now she feared the enemy had taken it. Yet, in that moment of vulnerability, the atmosphere shifted. A warm breeze, impossible in a closed room, brushed past her cheeks. The lights flickered, not with fear, but with something holy, something ancient and powerful. It felt as though heaven itself leaned closer. Her knees weakened, and she lowered to the floor, palms open, heart exposed. A thought, gentle yet commanding, rose within her spirit. Daughter, your crown was never lost, only hidden for a season. A presence wrapped around her like a comforting mantle, soothing the ache that had lived in her chest for months. The hairs on her neck stood upright, not with fear but reverence. She felt known, seen, understood in a way no person on earth had ever made her feel. Then came the vision. She saw herself standing on a great hillside, wind roaring, sky blazing with a golden hue. A radiant crown, pure, shimmering, almost alive, floated above her head. It wasn't made of gold or jewels, but of strands of light, weaving themselves like threads of destiny. Each strand pulsed with memory, her childhood innocence, her battles, her tears, her resilience, her prayers whispered in the dark. Every time she had thought she was breaking heaven had been shaping her crown. She gasped softly, watching the crown lower onto her head. When it touched her hair, warmth spread through her scalp, moving like flowing oil, healing, restoring, renewing. She felt strength return to her body, clarity to her thoughts, and confidence to her spirit. When the vision faded, she touched her head again. Not physically different yet, but spiritually transformed. For the first time in months, she looked into the mirror and didn't see loss. She saw promise. She whispered, almost smiling, "My crown is returning because my identity never left." That night marked the turning point. A divine intervention, a restoration no human could orchestrate. She rose from the floor different, lighter, bolder, no longer carrying the weight of shame or fear. She knew now that her hair, her crown, was under God's care, and what heaven protects, no enemy can destroy. The morning after her encounter felt unlike any morning she had ever lived. Dawn crept gently through the curtains, painting the room in soft strokes of gold. For the first time in a long while, she did not wake with heaviness. Instead, she felt a quiet strength humming within her, as though heaven had placed a new rhythm in her spirit. She stood before the mirror again, but this time she did not search for flaws or signs of loss. She simply looked at herself, truly looked, and saw a woman reborn. Her hair, though still in its healing phase, no longer appeared weak in her eyes. Every strand felt like a testament to her survival. Every inch felt deliberate, purposeful, sacred. As she touched it gently, she whispered, "This is my crown, and no human, no enemy, no trial will ever take it from me again." In the days that followed, something extraordinary began to happen. It wasn't merely physical regrowth, though that became evident too. It was spiritual regrowth, emotional regrowth, a restoration beginning from the inside and slowly working its way outwards. She found herself speaking with more authority, walking with more confidence, thinking with more clarity, praying with more faith. People around her noticed. Her friends asked what had changed. Her family felt the shift in her presence. But she knew she had stepped into her calling. God had not only restored her crown, He had awakened her destiny. One evening, while journaling, she felt a sudden urge to revisit the scriptures that had carried her through her darkest nights. Her eyes landed on Matthew 10:30. "Even the very hairs of your head are all numbered." She read it aloud, slowly, letting each word settle into her bones. For the first time, she understood it. God had never been distant. He had counted every strand. He had seen every tear. He had guarded her crown even when she believed it was lost. She felt tears gather, not tears of sorrow, but tears of profound gratitude. Her suffering had not been a punishment. It had been preparation. Preparation for the woman she was becoming. Preparation for the strength she now carried. Preparation for the mission heaven was calling her into. A calling to speak life into others who had forgotten the value of their own crowns. A calling to remind people, especially women, That identity is never rooted in appearance, but in divine purpose. Soon, she began to share her story, quietly at first, then boldly. Her testimony became a beacon for others walking through the same storms she once endured. Women wrote to her, some crying, some broken, some on the verge of giving up. But she shared the truth. Your crown can never be stolen, only covered, only tested, never lost. Her journey transformed from personal healing into a ministry of hope. And every morning, as she touched her hair slightly thicker, slightly stronger each day, she felt heaven's smile. Her crown was not merely returning, it was growing into something greater than before. By the end of her journey, she understood the miracle fully. God had not just restored her hair. He had restored her identity, her confidence, her purpose, her future. She no longer walked as the woman who once doubted her worth. She walked as the chosen one, crowned, anointed, and aligned with destiny.